All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Fall 2023 Investor Conference. My name is Robert Blum, Managing Partner of Lytham Partners. During this webcast, we welcome Jaguar Health, ticker symbol of JAGX on the NASDAQ. And joining us today from the company is its President and Chief Executive Officer, Lisa Conte. Today, Lisa will run through the company's slide presentation, and then we'll look to engage in a short question and answer session at the end here. Before we do begin, I want to remind everyone that management is available for one-on-one meetings later today. If you have not already signed up and would like to schedule a one-on-one meeting, you can send me an email. That's Blum, B-L-U-M, at lythampartners.com, or click on the website, lythampartners.com/virtual. There's a one-on-one meeting request button there, and we'll look to get you taken care of. So with that said, Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Robert. My favorite conference to participate in. And thank you all. Anybody who's heard the Jaguar Health story before, thank you. And this is a really momentous time for the company with a major momentum event just around the corner that I look forward to telling you about. So first of all, let's dispense with the forward-looking statements. We are a public company. Just to remind you what we do all plant-based medicines and focus in particular on gastrointestinal disorders, leveraging knowledge of traditional healers in rainforest areas to do more efficient drug discovery and development. And we do have a product that we've taken from a tree growing in the rainforest with traditional use to a paradigm-shifting, first-in-class novel mechanism of action, an anti-secretory active ingredient known as crofelemer, and the brand name is Mytesi, approved for non-infectious diarrhea in people living with HIV/AIDS on antiretroviral therapy adults. This is a specialty market. It's another word for specialty is relatively small market. It was fast-track priority reviewed by the FDA, which is the reason why it is our first indication. It is plant-based. It is natural. It's sustainably harvested, it's fair trade, and it is an FDA-approved drug, and it's the only oral drug approved by the FDA under botanical guidance. And under botanical guidance, there's no practical pathway to bring a generic crofelemer to the market. So we essentially have exclusivity forever. We don't face those patent cliffs, even though we do have over 155 patents issued. What the company is focused on now is the expansion of crofelemer into additional patient populations, again, because of this paradigm shifting, normalizing, modulating anti-secretory mechanism of the product. There's opportunities, as you can see, for about 8 different patient populations. We can't do it all, and what we are focused on right now is in a couple of weeks, the reveal of the p-value for the completion of a phase 3 pivotal trial to expand the indication of Mytesi, of crofelemer that is approved, to prophylaxis for cancer therapy-related diarrhea, all solid tumor patients, all on targeted therapies, those chronic therapies that are utilized in both a curative and a metastatic situation that have more than 50% diarrhea. That's about 25, 30 different agents with or without cytotoxic chemotherapy. We have a second clinical activity that we're pursuing right now for the rare disease indications, the orphan indications of crofelemer, the active ingredient in a different formulation, so a different product for short bowel syndrome and the intestinal failure associated with short bowel syndrome and congenital diarrheal diseases. To give you some idea of what we're talking about in terms of the size of the neglected need, the benefit to all the stakeholders, patients, all the way into our shareholders. If we talk about cancer therapy-related diarrhea, to give an analogy, the chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting market, which is for the most part a prophylaxis market, is projected to be about a $4 billion market. And about half of that market is valued at generic prices. And CINV is typically used, those agents are typically used for the first 3 days in cytotoxic chemotherapy, which is like a 6-month process. Again, cancer therapy-related diarrhea. Diarrhea is the #1 side effect. 80% of patients are dealing with it. And with targeted therapies, we have about 1.1 million cancer patients on treatment in the United States. With targeted therapies, patients are typically staying on these therapies for a year in a curative situation, for the rest of their lives in a metastatic situation, to keep cancer as a chronic situation that can be managed. And what's important to the patient is their quality of life, their supportive care, and also the opportunity to be successful and stay on their cancer therapy. About 40% of the time, patients will go off of their chemotherapy, off of their targeted therapy, because of the side effect of diarrhea. And now you're talking about an impact on the outcome of the treatment of the therapy. One so huge neglected need, and we're so pleased and rewarding to be working in this area. The clinical trial has been going on for about 6 years in planning and implementation, and the trial patient dosing for the primary endpoint is over, and we expect to have the p-value released in the next couple of weeks to expand the indication for a product that is already approved, a momentous event. The second market that we're talking about is the rare disease indication of intestinal failure with short bowel syndrome, congenital diarrheal disease. This is a classic rare disease business model, relatively small patient population, but high morbidity, high mortality, high expense, activated patient groups, patient support groups that bring in the long-term reimbursement. Third-party analysis puts this market at anywhere from a $5 to a $12 billion market. So this is, again, crofelemer, but in a different formulation, a different product, a whole different financial benefit scenario to the patient. So I can't say it enough, with particularly in this really very difficult financial market for biotech and small cap pharmaceutical companies. I don't know any other company that has this late stage clinical data literally around the corner. So the prophylaxis results for the cancer indication are coming out in the next couple of weeks. This would lead to, therefore, a supplemental NDA filing for Mytesi at around the end of the year, when we would look for priority review with a novel paradigm shifting mechanism of action of about 6 months. So we are preparing with success for the launch of the expanded label of the product that is already in the system, already in commerce, in mid-2024. Most new drug applications fail because of safety or manufacturing. We already have the product on the market with a chronic safety profile. We obviously have a full supply chain in place, from a tree growing in the rainforest to a bottle in any specialty pharmacy that we're looking for. So a risk-reduced situation of a supplemental NDA compared to the first time a product is being seeking approval on the market. For the second shot on goal, late stage clinical trial results shot on goal, we call this late stage because these are proof of concept studies. There's 6 of them going on right now around the world, some IND, some investigator initiated, for intestinal failure with short bowel syndrome or a rare congenital diarrheal disorder, MVID. We expect the first result to come out just about at the end of the year, and then additional results throughout the beginning of 2024. In Europe, with published proof of concept data, there is an opportunity for reimbursed revenue generation under an early patient access program in 4 European countries, a program that does not exist in the United States right now. So while the product is going through global regulatory trials and ultimately regulatory approval based on data that we have coming out at the end of this year, beginning of 2024, we could also be generating meaningful revenues in Europe in around mid and late 2024, coincident with the time frame that we'll be hoping to commercialize the expanded indication for Mytesi based on successful cancer results. And for the short bowel syndrome, it would be through a footprint that we've established in Europe called Napo Therapeutics, which is focused on the experience and the skill sets of implementing early patient access programs. So this is the most important messages for the company right now, with all the different activities that we have going on, all the different activities that any commercial stage pharmaceutical or biotechnology company has going on. These are the real momentum drivers, literally in the next couple of weeks and then before the end of the year. So I thought I would just do a bit on the really paradigm shifting mechanism of action of crofelemer and why, therefore, it has so many different patient populations it can benefit. So these are slices of gut. This is a human, but it could be a dog. It could be almost any mammal, because the site of action is highly conserved across all mammals. So on the left here, watery diarrhea, secretory diarrhea occurs when there's an insult to the inside wall of the intestine. That could be a drug insult, that could be a pathogen, it could be a physical disruption. It causes the active secretion of excess chloride ions into the lumen of the gut, which brings along sodium, which is salt, and then based on osmosis, the water comes in and the watery or secretory diarrhea goes out, and that's what you're seeing in the middle panel there. On the right, those little red dots are Mytesi. Mytesi is a chloride ion channel modulator or normalizer. So what it does is it works locally inside the gut to normalize the abnormal ion flow. If you are ion normal, you swallow a whole bottle of Mytesi, nothing happens. So it normalizes an overactive situation, working almost faster the more abnormal, the more severe the disruption is. That normalizes water flow and transit time. And because it's acting locally, there's no first pass effect, there's no secondary metabolites causing a problem later on, there's no drug-drug interaction, which is very important in complicated patients, cancer patients, short bowel syndrome patients, HIV patients, Crohn's disease patients, where you don't want to interfere with the other life-saving medications that they're taking. So it's important not only what crofelemer does, but what it doesn't do. And because other antidiarrheal agents that you might think of, like Imodium or loperamide, these are opioids, and they work essentially by the mechanism of constipation. So you can't stay constipated chronically. They make you loopy because they're opioids. They have limitations in access because they're opioids, and they're not labeled to be used under a chronic situation. Because crofelemer is not an opioid, we don't have that risk of constipation. Because it's not an antibiotic, we don't have the risk of resistance. Safety is a huge hallmark of the product in thousands of patients in commercial utilization and dozens of published clinical trials. We've never had serious adverse events associated with crofelemer. So back to this momentous event in the next couple of weeks, the release of the p-value on the pivotal trial to expand the indication of Mytesi for prophylaxis for cancer patients. These are all, it's a basket trial, all patients with solid tumors, and any targeted therapy that has on its label more than 50% diarrhea. You got about 5 dozen different targeted agents, new ones being approved every single day. You got about 2 dozen that have more than 50% diarrhea on their label. And the primary endpoint is to the prophylaxis, the prevention of diarrhea over about a 3-month period of time, looking essentially at the area under the curve, and secondary endpoints that are going to look at the opportunity, for example, for patients to stay on their cancer therapy. So we don't have the 40% reduction of therapeutic dose or elimination or changing of their therapy. Another interesting point is another third-party study showed that it costs about 3 times as much to take care of a cancer patient with diarrhea versus a matched cancer patient because of the need for hydration, the abnormal electrolyte balance. There have even been patients in targeted therapy clinical trials who have died because of the severe dehydration. So this is not your garden variety diarrhea we've all experienced if we've had a bad meal. This is severe homebound diarrhea on a chronic basis with many of these patients. We one of the really fascinating and rewarding things about being in this area is this is a first ever study that has fully incorporated patient voice from the very start. We did a survey before we even defined the endpoints of what would be meaningful in terms of quality of life, comfort, dignity to the patients, designed the endpoints with the paradigm shifting novel mechanism of action, the chloride ion modulator and normalizer of crofelemer, looking back at the success of the clinical work that was done to gain approval for the HIV indication. And the endpoint is based on patient reported outcomes. So hearing from the patient's own voice, the own recording of it on a daily basis of their stool formation and other factors with the secondary and exploratory endpoints. And what we've heard so loudly from the patients, particularly the metastatic patients who, in the past, quite frankly, it was hard to have a voice when they had a short life, but with these targeted treatments, they're living 5, 10, 15 years, and they're not willing to just exist. And so one patient so eloquently puts it as the pebble in the shoe. Can I have a pebble in my shoe for a day or a week? Sure. But the rest of my life? And how many pebbles are there? There's nausea, there's diarrhea, there's fatigue, there's neuropathy. It goes on and on. And so how can we make cancer suck less? How can we bring comfort to some of the side effects of these cancer therapies without causing another issue, without causing constipation, another issue that has to be dealt with, and at the same time allow the patient to successfully manage on their particular cancer therapy. Okay, and by the way, that study that we're about to release the results on is called the On-Target study. So what we're looking for is the statistical significance on the primary endpoint to expand the indication of Mytesi to prophylaxis for cancer therapy-related diarrhea in all solid tumor patients on targeted therapy. I'm going to switch now to crofelemer, the same active agent, but a different drug in a highly concentrated liquid formulation for our rare disease focus. We have orphan drug designation for short bowel syndrome, intestinal failure, and congenital diarrheal disease, specifically MVID, microvillus inclusion disease, which is an ultra rare disease with intestinal failure. So what happens in short bowel syndrome is, a typical bowel might be 20, 25 feet. Short bowel syndrome is 5 feet or less, could be as short as 30 centimeters. So the normal secretion and absorption of the nutrients of life, proteins, carbs, vitamins, etc., the patient doesn't have enough surface area with a short bowel syndrome to absorb the nutrients of life. So they often end up on total parenteral nutrition, IV nutrition, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. Obviously, catastrophic, very devastating to the patient, no quality of life, and a lot of complications, infections. It typically costs about $500,000 a year to be on total parenteral nutrition and can be twice or more than that based on the complications. So there's about 40,000 patients around the world. There is a product that is approved, Gattex, which is essentially a growth hormone. And what it's looking to do is grow the gut a little bit so that the need for parenteral nutrition can be decreased by about 15 to 20%. So now we have a regulatory approved endpoint reducing parenteral nutrition by about 15 to 20%. Everything other than crofelemer that we are aware of that is in the pipeline for development for this market that is expected to be a $5 to $12 billion market is a growth hormone approach. A limitation with all of these is that they can't be used in patients who have cancer or risk of cancer or some other hyperproliferative disease because it's a growth hormone. You don't want to grow the abnormal situation. In addition, when the patient has short bowel syndrome due to surgery, usually about a 15 to 18 month adaptation period of time because, again, you don't want to be growing the gut while there's adaptation from the surgery. So there is no standard of care. Even though there is a product approved, there is no standard of care. What we're looking to do with crofelemer and the beautiful safety profile we have with this product is to be the standard of care. We can be used in any situation where the patient may have cancer or an abnormal growth risk. We can be used before or right after surgery. Don't have to wait for bowel adaptation. If the patient is on a growth hormone, we could be utilized with the growth hormone as well. And the regulatory endpoint has been defined. By decreasing the secretions a bit, the anti-secretory mechanism of crofelemer that we discussed, we would hope to decrease secretion such that parenteral nutrition could be decreased by about 15 to 20%, as well as look at better stool formation with a short gut. Whatever goes in comes out like a sieve, so we would look for better stool formation and quality of life issues as well. I mentioned MVID because MVID is a congenital diarrheal disorder where the gut is fully intact, but there's intestinal failure. The patients are on total parenteral nutrition. So there's no option in development right now. A growth hormone is not relevant when the gut is already fully intact, just not functioning. And this is an ultra rare disease, a couple of hundred patients around the world. We have an IND approved. We've identified 10 to 12 patients around the world and feel that we could potentially get approval with a very, very small number of patients because of the ultra rare nature of this disease. And this would be the same drug, the same formulation that we would have for short bowel syndrome, intestinal failure as well. I'm going to move now to Canalevia, which is the second drug that we have approved under the Center of Veterinary Medicine of the FDA for chemotherapy-induced diarrhea in dogs. This is a conditional approval, which means it was a rapid approval based on an important unmet need in the canine area. There's about 100 million dogs in the United States. About 50% of them are going to get diagnosed with diagnosed with cancer. Typically, you have the same rates of diarrhea in humans, about 80% from their own cancer agents, or dogs sometimes are treated with human agents. And similar dynamics, about 40% of the time, the dog is being taken off of their cancer therapy by the parent or the oncologist, the veterinary oncologist, because of the side effect of diarrhea. And what's really fascinating in this area is we've seen anecdotally, some of the cancer manufacturers, now that there is a Canalevia approved, that there is a crofelemer approved, as they are facing obstacles to continued utilization of the anti-cancer agent because of diarrhea, we're getting a little commercial benefit, they're pointing to the fact that Canalevia is out there, which allows the animal a better shot of successfully staying on their cancer therapy, as well as the comfort and the supportive care of managing the diarrhea, not only for the dog's comfort, but the whole household, where you don't want a dog to have lost control. Our turnover at this point is based on Mytesi and Canalevia. Canalevia hit the market last year, so primarily Mytesi. This first product we ever commercialized, and we learned a lot about the messaging and the importance of patient voice, and also the importance of managing prior authorizations and total patient access programs with the complex process of reimbursement in the United States. We implemented that in the second quarter of 2002, and you can see our net revenues went up about 5-fold. In mid-2021, we completed a process of shifting to a specialty pharmaceutical distribution network, which has a just-in-time inventory management system. So we were buying down our inventory in the second quarter and third quarter of 2021. Prescriptions went up, but the recognition of the sales was based on a buy down of inventory. Completely done and over with right now. So we have a nice consistent growth that we're seeing in the HIV area, and really important learnings as we prepare to move into a much larger neglected need in the cancer area. We do have an early stage discovery program not associated with crofelemer, where we have about 2,300 plants that we've collected. Around 20% have benefits, clinical benefits that we have seen from field investigation in the mental health area. There are many companies that are looking at psychoactives and psychedelics, but they're all looking at the same thing, MDMA, psilocybin. So what's the next generation of agents that could provide new ways of treating and potentially curing mental health disorders? That is being pursued now with our contribution of these plants to a joint venture called Magdalena Biosciences. It's funded with an outside party, One Small Planet, which is the Petterly family. We own about 40% of that, and it's a mobilization, a leverage of an asset that we had sitting in the library, sitting in the company, since most of our activities are focused on clinical development of crofelemer right now. We have a lot of news. We're a very high volume trading stock, so it's easy to get in and out. We don't know any other company that has been in this devastating biotech market that has the late stage clinical trial results literally around the corner for a product already on the market. Our team is fully committed to bringing this product to the much larger patients, the much larger neglected needs that are out there, with the benefit to all the stakeholders, including the shareholders in the company. There's 10 of us have been together for over 15 years. 3 of us have been together for over 30 years. The team that designed the successful pivotal trials for HIV designed this trial that has been 6 years in the implementation, with results that will come out literally in the next couple of weeks. And these are the investment highlights, which I'll leave up there for a moment. The only thing that I will mention is we do have 146 patents issued and more filing every single day. But as I mentioned, we don't have that patent cliff that other products face because of the approval under botanical guidance, the only oral product that has that, and no real practical pathway to bring a generic to market. Okay, so I'll stop there. And Robert, how did I do it with my time frame?
Sounds good. Perfect timing here. I think we got a couple minutes for a few questions. I guess sort of taking a step back here, describe the learnings that you are attaining from your animal business to sort of the human launch activities.
So the animal business, which is also specialty market, again, a relatively small market, has been really surprisingly in important learnings because, first of all, we're in supportive care. And supportive care is more tightly embraced, it seems, with dog owners, because they can't talk to the dog and say, you know, just suck it up, it's going to be terrible, but then, you know, we're going to fight that cancer. So the focus on the comfort and the opportunity for the animal to successfully go through cancer therapy is paid more attention to. And also, again, for the whole household, as I mentioned, you know, there's, I think 70% of the dogs live in urban areas and apartments. You don't want to mess it up. But the other thing that I had also mentioned, which is just sort of fascinating, before our crofelemer is approved for something that's managing a side effect of another therapy, you can imagine the manufacturer of the therapy that's causing diarrhea, the cancer therapy that's causing diarrhea, you know, they're busy saying, oh, it's not so bad, it's a tolerable toxicity. The worst 2 words that you ever want to say to a patient is tolerable toxicity. It is not tolerable. But then the shift, once crofelemer is approved, rather than trying to, you know, convince the cancer community that it's tolerable to have this diarrhea, it's like, oh, here's a product that you can use to prevent or manage the diarrhea. So we're looking for that same type of partnership, and I don't mean formal partnership, but partnership for the benefit of the patient to be more comfortable as we get Mytesi approved for the cancer indication.
Got it. How do you sort of look to incorporate, you know, called patient voice into sort of the drug development and sort of the commercialization activities?
So we have our scientific advisory board is made up of the key opinion leaders that you typically would see, you know, in a company, particular therapeutic area, and key patient advocates as well. And that patient voice is so critical for all the things that I defined, from how we designed the study to the implementation of the endpoint. So not the way others sometimes will use patients, just, gee, can you approve this commercialization or can approve this advertising? And I think that is so important and just really hasn't been done yet in the pharmaceutical industry. So in addition to our paradigm shifting mechanism of action, I think it's going to be paradigm shifting in how we commercialize this product, incorporating patient voice, because of the convergence of what's going on in cancer therapy, because all of these wonderful agents that are being used chronically, these targeted agents, these immunomodulators that are allowing the metastatic patient to be a chronic patient for the rest of their lives. But it has to be a life that is worth living. And I don't think there's ever been a time like this. And the learnings that we had from HIV, we all learned so much from HIV advocacy about how to do clinical trials and bring about regulatory approval and focus on the dignity of the patient. We are carrying that learning through to the cancer world at this really unique time with all these targeted therapies that continue to get approved. And we're taking the lead on that.
Excellent. We've talked about this, I think, a little bit in the past, but what sort of led to this focus on the rare and orphan diseases?
So we're a plant-based company, we're a GI company. And it was based on the patient need and disease identification that just so happened to be a rare disease. So there are many companies, as you know, that are focused just on rare diseases. We're not. We're focused on GI, plant-based, and oh, by the way, here's two really important needs that happen to be rare diseases. So it's the incorporation of the rare disease orphan indication business model and a lot of the implementation and benefits that come there for these for the intestinal failure. So for example, relatively small patient populations that have to be studied, more of a global approach, particularly with the ultra rare disease, so that we can find all the patients, more communication with regulatory agencies. But one thing that's been very important that came out of that is a focus on nearer term revenue generation for the benefit of the patient, establishing a footprint now in Europe called Napo Therapeutics that is populated with people who have experience, employees who have experience with early patient access based on that proof of concept data that we're generating from IND and IITs in the next 6 months or so. So that we are moving towards products that can get to patients with this devastating catastrophic situation while we're going through the full development. So it was all driven by patient and patient need.
Got it. Perfect. I think we're sort of at the end of the time. Any final closing comments here?
Again, I can't say it enough. Everyone's sick of hearing it. The momentous events and the momentum events that are coming up literally around the corner a couple of weeks. And, unless you're in the pharmaceutical industry, the importance of something that you've been working on for 6 years in clinical development, in some sense for 34 years for the company. And it all comes down to one number. What is that p-value on the primary endpoint? So we're very excited.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. Greatly appreciate it. Again, I just want to remind everyone out there that if you've not already signed up for a one-on-one meeting and would like to do so, shoot me an email. Again, that's Blum, B-L-U-M, at lythampartners.com. Visit the website, lythampartners.com/virtual. Click on that one-on-one meeting request button, and we'll look to get you taken care of. So we hope you all enjoy the conference. Lisa, thank you so much.
Thanks, Robert. Nice to see you.